I sat down with Democratic Senator Mark Warner last night for reaction to bank CEO's comments. I asked him whether he shares executives' concerns that the Fed's proposed capital requirements could hurt lending and consumers. He told me the banks have an argument this time, and he's been told by regulators a lot of revisions are coming to that plan. Take a listen.
My friends in the banking industry, whenever there's a new regulation or rule, they always say the sky is falling, the sky ain't falling. This time, though, I think they've got an argument. I think that you've got the circumstance where interest rates are at a recent high. The idea of additional capital requirements and additional buffer beyond what's already in place will mean there'll be less capital available for lending. And when you've got even a civil rights organization saying this is not the right time, and I've been told by the regulators that they have a lot of revisions, but so I'm going to be anxious to see how this plays out. But I do think they have some concerns that ought to be heard out. At the same time, though, I get a little frustrated with them at times because there are other tools that could deal with issues like liquidity. If we go back to the very beginnings of the Federal Reserve, when it was first created, there was what's called the discount window, where if you've got a bank that's got a liquidity issue, you would go to that discount window. As a matter of fact, two of the major failures this year, SVB and Signature, didn't even know how to use that tool. So one of the things I've been exploring is, I know banks are reluctant to use it because it comes with a stigma, but you can't complain about other regulations if they don't use existing tools. So could we have a requirement that on some level of random basis, so that there was this, you had to demonstrate that you knew how to use the window, and can I work with the banking community so they can use that window in a way that doesn't create a stigma, doesn't hurt their stock price, but also is frankly a tool on liquidity that was set up in the first place.
If regulators don't make changes up to your liking, that you still feel like it's going to impede the economy, credit availability, the consumer, what is the prospect if that rule does pass close to its current form, that you could enact the Congressional Review Act to stop implementation, and would you support that?
I know that a whole lot of my Republican friends have already are making that threat. I felt like it was like kind of yin and yang at the hearing. You had some people saying, these banks have created every problem in capitalism. You've got the other group saying the regulators have created all these problems. I'm not, frankly, in either camp. I'm going to reserve judgment until I see what this final rule looks like, how many revisions are made, and then we can have that conversation.
Switching gears slightly, I want to ask you about artificial intelligence. You've expressed concern that it could disrupt capital markets. I know you have some legislation that you're working on that would designate the Financial Stability Oversight Council to look at those AI-related risks. What can you tell us about that? What does that include?
Well, remember, AI right now, without even the next generation, could completely disrupt trust in public markets through deep fakes, through the appearance of fake securities filings, through misinformation about products. I'm amazed that we've not seen more manipulation. And because artificial intelligence touches potentially so many parts of the market, it seems in my mind the FSOC, which was created out of the 2008 financial crisis, which brings together the head of all the regulatory entities that can look across the whole landscape, would be a good place to charge that group with recommendations. Now, let me be the first to acknowledge, FSOC's record of taking on big issues has been a little bit mixed, but boy, oh boy, this seems like a tailor-made problem for them to take on. And what we were looking at is, could they come up with regulations, make sure Congress still has a say, but have those regulations or ideas implemented with, again, appropriate congressional review.
When do you think we could actually see legislation on AI move forward? I know you have put forth legislative proposals. I know Leader Schumer has said this is a top priority. When can we see some of this enacted?
Well, I think, one, it has to be bipartisan, and I'm talking with a lot of my Republican colleagues, and I think the two areas where AI could be most disruptive is, one, we've talked about public markets, but also we come with a presidential and congressional elections next year. You could have huge manipulation in an election. So those would be areas that I think we should start. Some of the more grandiose schemes that we're going to come up with an entire framework, I think that may be too ambitious. Again, I've got the scars from trying to, I've got a dozen different bipartisan bills around social media, and not a single one has passed. So I'm a little less ambitious in terms of what we can pass in the short term.
Speaking of social media, TikTok has received major criticism in the wake of the Israel-Hamas war for the feeling that they put forth pro-Palestinian content and perhaps anti-Semitic content. This, of course, on top of fears from lawmakers that perhaps China is able to use this app to spy on the U.S. As the head of the Senate Intelligence Committee, would you be in favor of banning TikTok?
Well, I actually had legislation earlier this year called the Restrict Act. 13 Republicans, 13 Democrats, completely bipartisan, the administration supported, that wouldn't specifically ban TikTok. I think we need a framework, though, that would give the Commerce Department the ability for technologies that are ultimately controlled by foreign adversarial powers, countries like China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, to have a process. TikTok would still get its day in court, but we don't even have a way to kind of grapple with it. And we were moving along smoothly until TikTok spent about $100 million on advertising and lobbying. We had the far left and the far right attack us. But I do think TikTok's a challenge. I mean, there's a lot of creativity on TikTok. I just wish it wasn't, at the end of the day, controlled by the Communist Party of China.
And my big thanks to Senator Mark Warner for that interview.